You're listening to Northwoods Church Matters, a podcast of Northwoods Church in Evansville, Indiana, where we discuss why the local church matters and things that matter to the local church. I'm your host, Matt Higgins. On today's episode, I'm joined by Darren Garton, who is our Associate Pastor of Discipleship and Community here at Northwoods Church. Today, we're going to talk about connection to the local church and people that feel disconnected to the local church. We're going to discuss how you can deepen your connection to the local church. We're also going to take a look at how you can connect to others. And we're going to talk about how you can stick around for the long haul at a local church. All this and more on today's episode of Northwoods Church Matters. Well, welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with Darren Garton. He is our Associate Pastor of Discipleship and Community here at Northwoods. Glad you're here, Darren. And we're going to talk about community today, about what it means to be a part of a community. So first area we're going to talk about today is what's the difference between church attendance and church connection. And so here's my first question for you, Darren. What's the difference between church attendance and being connected to a church?
Okay, so this may be a stretch for you, but I'm going to ask you to think back before you were married to when you were dating. And I didn't do this a lot, but maybe when you were dating around, okay? And, you know, you're dating someone, and maybe it's a first date or something like that, but you know in this relationship whether there's going to be another date, you know? But maybe you're dating one person, maybe you're dating several people, you're just having fun and doing fun things together or whatever. But there comes a point where you are in a relationship with somebody, and it's not the sort of, and it's exclusive. It's the sort of thing that we are involved with one another, and then it moves to a place of being committed to one another. Now, it's not exactly that way with church attendance versus, you know, being connected to a church, but there are some similarities to that, you know, being connected to a church is different than just sort of, I'm going to this church now for a little while, and I'm going to this church now for a little while. There is a difference in the way it feels to you and the way it feels to the people that are in the church, and the fact that you are committed to some degree to those who are in the church. You're committed to the people of that church. You're committed to ongoing relationship with those people. And so, you know, we're trying to think about how is it that people are connected to a church and help them to get connected and not just attend. In other words, not just date, but to really be committed to the church, to be involved with the church.
Yeah, to stop dating the church. Actually, there's a good book by that title. It's Stop Dating the Church by, I think it's Josh Harris. So that's a short little read, but it's the same type of topic and same type of theme that the Bible calls us to be committed to a church. And I think one of the illustrations in the Bible that we can hit on for that is the illustration is Christ is the groom and then the church is the bride. Inherently, if you use that illustration, there's that sense of there's got to be a commitment there between two parties.
That's right. I think it should be that way rather than just I am involved with this church for a little bit and I go to this church for these things. There needs to be some sort of connection and when you do that I think produces spiritual growth in the life of the people who are committed to one another.
Is some of the issue that the world is not the same as it was several years ago?
Yeah, I think society's changed somewhat in the sense of, you know, some of the social media things give the impression that you are connected with someone when you may not be in reality. And you know, you may see somebody's pictures or you may see the image that they project and not necessarily know the person. And, you know, it can foster the idea that we're connected through observation without interaction, that I'm connected to you as long as I see you. And we can sort of have that in the church where I come to church, or I wave to people, I say hi, but I come and go without really any real connection to the people. And that's not good. I think it's more helpful for us to be in a place where I am known by other people and I know other people. We don't want to be in a place where we're coming to church and just exchanging pleasantries and so forth, but never really knowing the people who are around us. That kind of connection takes time and interaction and involvement, or there's no real connection.
Yeah, marriage would be another good example of that, right? That we can be technically married to somebody,
Sure.
but not living out marriage.
That's exactly right.
And so I could be married to my wife, and then I could go home and not communicate with her, and not eat dinner with her, and not spend time with her, and we're still technically married, but there's no depth to what the marriage is.
That's right. It takes your involvement, your commitment, in order for there to be a connection, or else there isn't really a connection. You can just go to church and really not be connected to the other people who are there.
That's how a lot of churches are set up nowadays, right? Because some churches, they actually play into this, that a lot of what congregations want nowadays is to show up for a particular service and feel like they're being fed, and then to leave and not think about church again for another week.
I've seen that, where they're designed really for no connection. They're designed for you to come, maybe sit and listen, and then go out without ever really interacting with one another. And there may not be any programming in the church either, where they're trying to say, we really want you getting together with people. They just say, well, come back next Sunday. And I think one of the things that we have tried to do is to create these venues where if you will, it's voluntary, we don't force that on anybody, but if you will, you can get involved with other people, you can get connected with people and know them on a deeper level than just that surface thing that we see when somebody's just attending church.
You're not saying that church attendance isn't important, are you?
No, in fact, church attendance is really important. Lifeway Research did a study about the reasons people stop attending church. And they found that one of the main reasons people stop attending church is that they just get out of the habit. So they have a vacation and they miss a Sunday, and then maybe they have a family event that they go to. Maybe they have a ball game or something like that. And just through time, it begins through neglect. Maybe they begin to just not go to church, to get out of the habit of going to church. And I think there's a high connection between between church attendance and being really connected in a church. Lifeway also did a study that found that those who attend church once a week are twice as likely to be completely committed to attending the church than those people who only attend twice a month. That those who attend once or twice a month are more likely to be moderately committed than those who attend go at least once a week. And so it matters that we attend church. I'm just saying that it's more important that when we attend, we're connected with other people. When we get involved with things related to the church, we make an effort to know other people and to be connected to other people.
I think one of the interesting outgrowths of this phenomenon of people generally attending church less is that there's actually a national push now that there's a Sunday, I think it's in September, that it's labeled National Back to Church Sunday.
Yeah.
And there's a big marketing push trying to get people to come back to church after the summertime. But I think it's fascinating that we have to have a Back to Church Sunday now in our culture.
Amnesty for all the services you've missed. Now you can come back and there's no harm, no foul.
Get out of jail free card.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and part of this phenomenon, right, is that statistically people are attending church less frequently.
Right. We've talked about that here is if somebody attends our church, where it used to be 3 times a month was regular attendance, and now it's down at 2 times a month, trending towards 1 time a month. And what does that affect? What effect does that have on, what people are learning from the scripture? What effect does that have, especially for what we're talking about here in terms of how connected you feel? Because it's impossible to be connected without seeing one another. I mean, I wouldn't try that with my wife to say, I'll see you next month, and we'll be connected to one another. That wouldn't fly very well, and yet we want deep connections without the discipline of going, and it's just impossible to do that. The church cannot overcome, your connection if you're not attending church, but you also have to be, put forth the effort to know other people and to be involved in those things that'll help you stay connected.
I think it's odd that we want in church life deep connection with little effort, when in most areas of our life, we don't expect that. I mean, in dating, we don't expect that we're going to have like this huge, massive love connection with somebody after one date, or without actually spending time with somebody, or getting to know coworkers without spending time with them and making an effort. The same concept goes with church, is that relationships require effort.
Well, and one of the keys to community is what we call shared experience. That in order to have deep relationships, you have to have things that you have shared together. And that can be a church service that we've experienced, or something that we learned together. That can be a group experience where we have eaten together, where we have spent time together, where we have sat around a bonfire together, those kinds of things. But we can't have connection without having shared experience. And that is the unique thing about our world, is we think, well, I want that, but I'm not willing to put forth the time to have the shared experience. We have to be willing to invest in order to have deep connections with other people.
Yeah, I was working with one of our church volunteers. Her name is Julie Greenbank, and she said something a few years back to me that has always stuck with me. And then I've repeated the phrase that she said, church people get to know each other by serving together. And I think that's definitely true. I think about our Awana ministry here at the church. Our Awana workers and our kids workers are really tight-knit, and that comes from the fact that they hang around each other all the time and they serve together. My youth workers in the youth department, they're very close to each other. They like each other. They like hanging out with each other, and they often hang out with each other when we don't have kids around. And so that's a good thing. And it's a virtue of those relationships that are being formed just because we're serving together.
Shared experiences build connection with one another.
Absolutely. Let's switch gears here and let's talk about some key practices that help you feel connected to a church. Because I feel like there are some people that are out there and they want to get connected. They just don't know how. And so what are some key factors that make someone feel connected to a church?
I know I mentioned Lifeway Research a lot, but they did a study a while back about how people feel, what makes people feel connected to a church for the long haul. And so, in other words, what helps somebody not to just feel connected when they go to church, but what causes them to stay in a church long term. And they found there's 7 key practices. I'll go through them briefly, but one is that they have taken the steps of affiliation with the church. In other words, they've become official members of the church. Whatever that process is that the church says to be members, they have decided, well, if this is what the church says, this is what I'm going to do. And it's not just that I'm just jumping through the hoops that the church has. It's saying, I want to be officially connected. I'm going to be officially committed, in much the way in the dating relationship we're talking about, that it makes a relationship different when you have that conversation that defines the moment.
You have the DTR talk.
That's
the relationship.
Define the relationship moment. It's different when you do that in terms of how I feel about the church and how the church feels about me. For us, that's the Northwoods class. We invite people to attend the Northwoods class. We do those every other month. You can, after you've attended the class, there's a couple of sheets to fill out, and you can say, I want to be a part of this church family. But that can help strengthen your connection to the church. Another key practice I already mentioned is they have consistent church attendance. We've already said that a key indicator of whether you'll feel connected to a church is, are you faithful in attendance? The third is they pursue key relationships in the church through small groups. It's possible to attend a church service and to come in, sit through all of that, and to leave when the service is over and never interact with a single person. Really, that's usually our choice, because I can choose whether I'm going to stay around long enough to be able to connect to other people or not. But pursuing relationships in small groups is a key way that you are connected to others. We talk about that in moving people from rows to circles. In other words, they're sitting in seats where they're facing forward. We want to put them in places where they're sitting on couches and chairs, or maybe chairs in a circle. That way they're able to interact with others.
Because you're not going to build in-depth relationships just by coming to the Sunday service, right?
No, I mean, and there's so much of it, at least the way what happens a lot now, where you have somebody maybe come to church late after the music's already started, and they maybe leave as soon as the final dismissal is done, and it becomes you don't talk to anybody. You come and go, and nobody knows you, and you don't know anybody else. So I think there is some purposefulness about trying to get there early, not just because I don't want to be late, but because of the practice of spurring one another on to love and good deeds, as Hebrews 10 talks about. That I want to show up in order to encourage people, and the only way I can do that is to allow time in my schedule to be able to do that. A fourth key to connecting, they said, is they give financially, and that giving is a key of how connected you'll feel to a church. I think that's borne out in Scripture, where it just says that, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. Your heart follows where you give your money. So giving is not just an issue of obedience. It also has to do with how connected you'll feel in the church. They said a fifth thing of feeling connected is serving in the body in some way. That when you're serving in some area, as you mentioned, you strengthen your connection to other people, you build relationships, and you have shared experiences in serving. It may be battle scars sometimes, but you do have, through serving, you are able to be connected. Sixth thing is inviting people to church. That when you invite people to church, it does something to cause you to feel more connected to a church because you're invested in what you promote. And then finally, they found that people who are seeking to mature in their faith daily have a stronger connection to the church. They found that people who were being intentional about growing in their faith, also as a part of growing in their faith, made their connection to the church just a regular thing, where they said, I'm committed to this group of people. We're going to grow in the Lord together. And that is predictive of whether you will be involved in the church for the long haul.
You talked about scars there, and I think that hits on something that I think is important that often is not talked about, that when we go through suffering and the negative experiences of life together, that really bonds people together. I remember I had a pastor that when I was early on in my pastorate that gave me the advice, and he said, you become somebody's pastor when you show up to the hospital. And what he was trying to get across is that when you minister to somebody in the midst of suffering, that creates a deep connection with somebody. And so when our church members, they show up to a funeral, or they come to a nursing home and deal with somebody that's convalescent, or they interact with somebody in the midst of suffering on a real deep level, that's going to build connection with people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what and it takes effort to do that, to know what's going on with somebody, to be alert to those opportunities that you can have to show up when there's grief, to show up when there's a moving van, to show up in those kind of situations. But when you do that, people remember that, and you become the kind of people that are connected to one another, more than just that, oh, we attend church together, we sit in seats together. We become really the body of Christ, brothers and sisters of Christ, whenever we're serving in those ways together.
A couple just random questions based on what you just talked about. If somebody's watching our services online and they're not coming to actually a physical church service, how deep of a connection are they going to have with the local church?
Well, I mean, this is tricky because we are grateful that we have an online ministry, and it really is for those people who are unable to attend church for whatever reason. Some people are homebound and they can't get out. Some people for health reasons. Some people are in a place where maybe they're required to travel for work or something like that. And we really like having that as a way to stay connected to the church. So, I mean, it is a way to be connected more so than you could if you never were able to attend at all. But I think we've been clear to say to people, we don't want you to use that as an excuse not to go to church. We don't want it to be a reason that you say, well, I don't have to go to church at all, I can just watch it online. I mean, that becomes the sort of thing where it can keep you from relationships rather than help you build relationships. So it is a good tool, but it's limited in what it can do. We want to try to use it to minister in ways that we couldn't otherwise.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, we are grateful for people to tune in and watch on Facebook or on our website. We love the fact that you're interacting with the church. But if you're able to physically come to church, that's a good thing, because You cannot do the love one another's of Scripture if you're not here. You can't encourage one another. You can't admonish one another. You can't love one another. The one another's of Scripture happen in community, and it's hard to have community if you strictly have an online presence with the church.
That speaks to intentionality, too, when you are here, of not just coming and going, or not having the expectation, well, I hope somebody talks to me. Well, be an initiator. Be somebody who seeks to encourage other people. And I think sometimes it becomes a situation where we want people to talk to us, but typically we have to be in the place where we are talking to one another and we're trying to connect with other people. We're intentional about that.
So last question for you. In order to feel connected at Northwoods, what would you say that somebody needs to do?
So, 7 things is a lot to remember, but I think that in the survey I mentioned, but I would say it this way: to be connected to a church, you need a relationship and you need a responsibility. In other words, you need a relationship. You need at least one person, and preferably several people who know you, that you're connected to, that know what's going on with you, that know if you get sick, that know if you have a struggle, that know what's going on with your family. And you need a relationship with people who know you. That's part of what we're trying to do with connect groups. Connect groups are just a tool, really. They help us set a regular time of meeting with other people. Yes, you can grow spiritually. Yes, you study the Bible and those sorts of things. We're intentional about opening up the Word. But the main reason that they're called connect groups is because we're hoping you'll connect with a few other people on a regular basis, that you'll build strong relationships with some folks. We could just hope that will happen naturally, and sometimes it does. There are some people who actually are better at that than others. But for a lot of people, life gets busy, things happen, and before you know it, you've gone months and you really aren't connecting with anybody. So when you have a connect group, you have a pretty regular meeting where you can say, we're going to get together with these people every other week, every week, and we're going to share life together. And people that do that and that are diligent to do that can find that they're connected with people, they're connected with the church in ways that you cannot by just attending church periodically. And that's one of the keys to having a relationship with people through a connect group, is one of the keys to connecting for a church really over the long haul. I was looking at another Lifeway. Seems like all I do is read Lifeway research. That's not true, but
I do it all the time too.
Right. But Lifeway research found that someone who is in a group is 5 times more likely to be in a church after a 5-year period. That's a pretty strong statistic in terms of connecting to people. You're 5 times more likely to stay around at a church if you have another relationship in the church. And connect groups are one way you can do that. You need a relationship. The second thing, you need a responsibility. In other words, a place to serve. Serving at Northwoods is a key way to grow in your connection to it. A common statistic in church life is, Matt, as a former senior pastor, is that Pareto principle that says that 20% of the people in the church do 80% of the work. But that's really not the way it's supposed to be. The Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians 12 that we're a body and we're all connected to one another and everybody has their role to play. And really that body analogy is so key, because when you're serving using your gift, you feel connected to the rest of the body. And so having something that you do in relationship to the church, whether it's serving on a greeter team, or it's leading a connect group, or working with a WAN or in BBS or something like that, that serving together using your spiritual gift, whatever that is, really helps you feel connected to the other people in the church. You realize how much you need them, how much you appreciate them, and they can learn how much they appreciate you by what you bring to the table. To put it another way, you need people to love and you need a place to serve. And those are 2 real key ways that if you'll do those, you can be connected to the church in ways that you never would in just attending and just coming and going and never really being involved. Join a group, join a team, and get connected to Northwoods. That's a way to be connected here.
That's a good word. And let me just put in a plug for kids ministry and student ministry as well, because parents will throw me the question, how do I get my child or my teenager involved in Northwoods Church? And the answer really is the same as the answer for adults, is that community is built on shared experiences. And so a lot of our ministry is built on having those type of shared experiences for kids to interact with. Our primary goal for our kids in our student ministry is I want every single student or kid that comes into the doors of Northwoods to hear the gospel. But secondary to that, we want them to build lifelong friendships and lifelong relationships. And so a lot of what we do is geared towards that. For example, Awana. We have in every single group, we have 30 minutes of games in Awana. The purpose of having games is for kids to build relationships with each other. Or we have theme nights at Awana where we do goofy stuff together. And the point of dressing up all like clowns one night or whatever the theme is for the kids to build bonds and relationships with each other. And so we have a summer calendar for the youth with lots of fun activities. And our preschool department, they have some mother-child play dates that are coming up. And we do these things because we realize that in order for relationships to be formed, there needs to be shared experiences. And so that's the answer for kids and teenagers as well. Shared experiences builds community. Thanks for joining us today on the Northwoods Church podcast. If you'd like some more information on our ministry at Northwoods Church in Evansville, Indiana, please visit us online at www.northwoodschurch.org. Again, that's www.northwoodschurch.org. We'll see you next time.